It is easy to let despair seep into the cracks of our thoughts and souls and grow unchecked, until it seemed impossible to escape. In the form of a shadow, it accompanies us at all times, muttering words of despair and helplessness. Rather than being overbearing or strident, it hums softly and quietly in the background. At times of quiet, when all outside noise has dissipated, and we are alone with our ideas, the crushing weight of despair becomes most apparent. Envision a life where every moment feels like a chore with no real purpose. Every day is monotonous and dreary, just like the last. Nothing is building. There is no enthusiasm, no goal. There seems to have been a complete and utter drain on life force, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell. Things that used to make me happy and fulfilled now seem like relics from a bygone era, things that I will never get back. People go about their daily lives and the world keeps spinning, but I feel as if I'm looking through a dense fog. Let despair be your thief. It drains our vitality, removes the brightness from our eyes, and cools our spirits. The toll on our morale and determination to keep going is gradual but steady. It is the persistent sense that we are inadequate, and that our efforts will never be sufficient. The inner critic tells us we're not good enough, that we don't deserve love, happiness, or even life. The appearance of improvement might intensify this sense of hopelessness. From an early age on, we hear that the key to a happy and fulfilled life is hard effort and the pursuit of one's dreams. What if, however, we succeed in accomplishing our objectives, only to discover that there is still a void inside? What do we do when the things we worked so hard to attain end up making us feel even more empty inside? The relentless quest for achievement has the potential to turn into a cruel farce, a never-ending quest for an unattainable ideal. Upon realizing that the world does not care about our pain, a certain type of despair sets in. Humans are simply a little dot in the enormous scheme of things, and nature is both enormous and heartless. In comparison to the boundless cosmos, our lives, our hardships, and our suffering appear little. As a sobering reminder that we are, in the end, not alone in our pain, this cosmic apathy can be too much to bear. The cosmos is unmoved by our cries for explanation and significance, and it keeps mute no matter how loud we get. As we sink further into despair, the tales we tell ourselves, the narratives we build to make sense of our life, tend to shatter. When our carefully constructed illusions of purpose and direction fall apart, we are left to flounder aimlessly in an ocean of chaos. Everything we previously believed in is now under scrutiny as our core beliefs and ideals being rocked to their very core. Trusting our own senses, finding truth, and maintaining stability all become challenging in this mindset. A deep feeling of loneliness is another way despair may show itself. One can still have a profound sense of solitude, even when in the company of people. In the face of an inner emptiness, the bonds we form with others around us may seem frail and shallow. At its worst, alienation may make us feel as if we're in a parallel universe, cut off from the rest of mankind. There is an ever-present wall that stops us from getting to know one another on a deeper level. Even if we interact with people on a regular basis, the mind becomes a prison in this state of seclusion. All the meantime, the same gloomy conclusions keep popping into one's head. Constant feelings of worthlessness, failure, and self-criticism are impossible to shake. As we spiral deeper into depression, it is harder to tell reality from our own projections of hopelessness. Once a haven, the mind now becomes a maze of misery. At one point, I felt like this abyss was swallowing me whole. Everything seemed to have faded to a muted gray, as if the world had become colorless. The thought of facing another day of nothingness would fill me with dread every morning when I would awaken. I would seem as though nothing was wrong by meeting all of my responsibilities, but deep inside, I felt lifeless. Nothing ignited. No enthusiasm, no drive. I wasn't living. I was just existing. Attempting to dispel the overwhelming feeling of hopelessness, I sought refuge in a variety of pursuits throughout this time. However, the shadows persisted regardless of my actions. Its presence was constant, If I allowed my guard down, it would pounce. The weight of hopelessness dragged me down, and it seemed like I was fighting an uphill battle the whole time. Despair may warp our perspectives, which is one of its most sinister features. It adds a hue to everything we see, dulling the brightness of even the most picturesque scenes. Just as a sunset may inspire amazement and wonder, it can also serve as a sobering reminder that joy is transient. Once a sound of pure delight and innocence, children's laughing now echoes with the sorrow of bygone days. Rather of bringing us consolation, memories tainted by despair become causes of anguish. Desperation has its ironies. It seems to hit us the most when we least expect it. Things can appear to be okay at first glance. Life may be good for us if we have fulfilling jobs, wonderful family, and nice homes. Underneath it all, though, lies an insatiable need, an unfulfilled sense of incompleteness. Because of how frustrating this paradox is, it makes us wonder whether we're crazy. Despite our plenty, why do we feel so emptied? A plea for aid that no one hears. Despair is a quiet scream. Feeling like we have nowhere to go and no light to help us find our way is the best description. The burden is always pressing down on our chest, obstructing our breathing, thoughts, and movements. Our will to life, our inner fire, is dwindling away at a snail's pace. When hopelessness seems like it would swallow us whole, we must remember that it is just temporary. The thought of getting away from it all might take over during these times. An end to suffering, a way out of the constant misery, may be an enormously alluring prospect. Countless people give in to this perilous temptation when they're at their lowest. Still, a peculiar clarity emerges even in the darkest of times. It pulls away all the veneers, the pretenses, and the emptiness of existence. The unfiltered reality of our existence is exposed. Because of this, we are compelled to face our most insidious anxieties, negative ideas, and weaknesses. Though it exposes the harsh truth of our situation, it is a merciless and harsh educator. Everyone experiences despair at some point in their lives. It's a sign of how vulnerable our thoughts and emotions are. It serves as a sobering reminder that no matter how hard we try, the shadows can still find a way to haunt us. Being able to relate to one another's pain is fundamental to our humanity and a component of what it is to be human. On the other hand, it's also quite individual, a path that we must all follow our own way. Ultimately, despair serves as a reflection of our innermost shadows. It makes us face our darker selves, the bits we'd prefer not think about or deal with, including our anxieties and uncertainties. It is an indestructible, unstoppable force that refuses to be ignored or forgotten. No matter where we go, it is always there, casting a shadow. We press on, burdened by our hopelessness, seeking significance in a universe that provides none. The constant presence of shadows follows us about like a shadow puppet as we go about our daily lives. In the midst of an oppressively brutal existence, we claw for moments of relief, fleeting glimmers of hope. This is how hopelessness embeds itself in our being, leaving an eternal imprint on our spirits. It influences the way we see things, think, and behave. Silently bearing witness to our anguish, it attests to the profundity of our anguish. Our lives are delicate and transient, and the darkness that lingers on the periphery of our awareness is a constant companion as we wind our way through the maze of our misery. There will always be writing that deals with despair, since it is a universal issue that touches people's hearts and minds. The ability to put into words what is really a state of despair goes beyond the scope of simple expression. Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground is a great example of a book that explores the philosophical and psychological dimensions of despair via its gloomy and introspective tale. The terrifying Notes from Underground follows a guy as he sinks farther and further into his own mental pit. The protagonist, who goes under the moniker Underground Man, is a tragic figure who personifies hopelessness. A deep feeling of estrangement, anger, and self-loathing permeate his story. Viewed through his eyes, we may observe how hopelessness engulfs a person, warping their perception of reality and threatening their own survival. The underground man's hopelessness stems from his profound self-awareness and his futile attempts to decipher the world's significance. A man mired in an eternal cycle of self-doubt and self-disdain, he is acutely conscious of his own inadequacy. His self-reflection is more of a descent into the depths of his own mind than a path to enlightenment. The protagonist's struggle with feelings of worthlessness in the face of an apparently uncaring environment is a common thread among those who have felt hopelessness. Desperation, as it pertains to Notes from Underground, represents the protagonist's existential dilemma. His aspirations for grandeur are at odds with the ordinary circumstances in which he finds himself. Because of this cognitive dissonance, he feels helpless in every aspect of his life. His ambitions are completely ridiculous, but he still can't let go of them. This just serves to deepen his anguish by perpetuating the cycle of desiring and being let down. His interaction with civilization stands out as a stark manifestation of the underground man's misery. In his mind, he is essentially apart from the people around him, and he sees himself as an outsider. This estrangement goes beyond a social dimension and into the very essence of being. The same experiences and feelings that unite people are incomprehensible to him since he believes he is inherently different. Because he is so sure of his own otherness, his sadness grows worse in this solitude. Throughout his contacts with others, the underground man exudes an air of deep cynicism and disdain. He is able to see dishonesty and superficiality underneath people's outward appearances. To the contrary, this realization only serves to heighten his feelings of alienation and hopelessness, rather than alleviate them. He feels even more alone and believes that human interactions are pointless, since he is caught in a paradox where his knowledge and perception just make things worse. Free choice is a common theme in the underground man's reflective monologues. The knowledge that his acts are frequently motivated by illogical impulses, rather than logic or reason, haunts him. His feeling of control and agency is eroded by this realization, which adds to his misery. Realizing that his wants and deeds frequently conflict, he sadly becomes aware of the limitations of his own volition. Despair and powerlessness set in as a result of this inner struggle. The fact that the underground man has no idea what he's here for only adds fuel to his fire of misery. Because he believes that conventional means of achieving happiness and contentment are nothing more than illusions, he chooses to ignore them. Because of his nihilistic outlook on life, he is unable to escape the cycle of hopelessness that characterizes his existence. The crushing weight of his hopelessness traps him within his own thoughts, and he is powerless to break free. The Portrait of the Underground Man by Dostoevsky delves profoundly into the depths of human anguish. We get a look into the psyche of a man whose own shadow consumes him through his story. His despair is an enduring condition that influences his every thought and deed. It is not an ephemeral feeling. As a sobering reminder of how precarious our own emotional and mental health is, it stands as evidence of the devastating power of despair on the human mind. As we explore the underground man's thoughts further, we observe how his despair shows itself in several parts of his existence. His distrust of and difficulty in relating to people taints his relationships. A persistent feeling of not measuring up and failing cloud his view of himself. Recognizing the eventual futility of his academic endeavors even thwarts his attempts to take consolation in them. Because of the paralysis brought on by his crippling sadness, he is unable to experience genuine happiness or contentment in life. The narrative of the underground man is a powerful allegory for the human experience, a constant companion on this journey called life. It has the power to engulf us, molding our views and deeds in ways we seldom have a say in. It lurks in the shadows, waiting to steal our identity and break us off from the world. On the other hand, it exemplifies how strong the human will is, showing that people keep looking for answers even when things seem hopeless. A profound contemplation of the essence of hopelessness. Notes from Underground concludes. A representation of the devastating effect that despair can have on the human spirit. It presents a bleak image of a man whose shadows have engulfed him. The story of the Underground Man shows us how hopelessness shapes and defines our lives and how deep it may go. The fact that we all have to deal with sadness in our different ways serves as a sobering reminder that it is inherent to being human. The Stranger by Albert Camus is another moving examination of hopelessness. The novel's distant protagonist and harsh, minimalist style provide an introspective look at the folly of existence and the existential misery that comes from it. The narrative of the emotionally distant and uncaring man Meursault provides a potent prism through which to view the abyss of human misery. Throughout his life, Meursault feels an overwhelming sense of estrangement and loneliness. A disturbing emotionlessness permeates his interactions with the people and events around him as he progresses through life. For him, life is just a string of dull occurrences, with no real significance. This disconnection is more than just a character flaw. It permeates his whole being and is an outward sign of his profound sadness. The narrative tone of the work is established by the events surrounding the death of Meursault's mother, which occurs at the beginning of the story. Meursault's response to her death is remarkably emotionless. He attends the funeral rituals coldly, caring more about the oppressive heat than he does about grieving his mother's death. His incapacity to find significance in the conventional indicators of human existence is mirrored in this reply, which is a glaring sign of his existential despair. We observe Meursault's interactions with his environment as the plot develops. He forms shallow relationships and participates in meaningless pursuits, seems unconcerned with the world around him. There is no real emotional connection in his relationship with Marie, even though she obviously cares about him. As a whole, Meursault is uninterested in living, and that includes his treatment of her love. The novel's turning point occurs on a beach when, in an almost eerie and unexplainable deed, Meursault shoots an Arab guy. Committed without any reason or emotional investment, this violent act exemplifies the absurdity that Camus aims to emphasize. Society views Meursault's lack of normal emotions as more of a crime than the murder itself, and his arrest and trial follow as a show of this judgment. The tragicomedical trial of Meursault demonstrates how society tries to provide order and purpose to a reality that is really meaningless. It is a farce. In an effort to make sense of Meursault's conduct, the prosecution and defense lawyers have imposed their own narratives on his acts. None of these easy answers can explain Meursault's sadness and his realization of the ridiculousness of life. In this senseless world, he is a sobering reminder of how pointless it is to try to find purpose. Meursault has a metamorphosis while he waits for his execution in jail. He faces his own death and the cold, uncaring cosmos in which he lives. The only thing that comes out of this meeting is a greater understanding of how ridiculous life is, not some sort of salvation or enlightenment. When Meursault realizes that death is inevitable and that human life is ultimately futile, his sorrow reaches its peak. Although he does not find solace in this realization, he does come to terms with it. Camus examines the concept that sadness is universal in the human condition via the narrative of Meursault. The contradiction between the meaning we seek and the meaningless, chaotic cosmos gives rise to this. Detachment and apathy are more than merely personality quirks for Meursault. They reveal a profound existential anguish. He personifies the comical hero, a man who doesn't believe in fairy tales, and who bravely faces life as it is. At the end of the book, when Meursault is about to be executed, there is a profound reflection on what it means to be depressed. Accepting the ridiculous gives Meursault a peculiar sense of freedom in his last hours. There is no greater meaning or purpose to his life, and he realizes that the cosmos doesn't care about his destiny. While this acceptance does help him see things more clearly, it does not remove his sadness. Rather, it gives it a new shape that is grounded on a sober appraisal of humanity. An uncompromising look at existential misery is presented in The Stranger. Camus explores the essence of humanity through Meursault's voyage, showing how apathy toward the cosmos may lead to a deep feeling of isolation and futility. Meursault's aloofness and lack of interest indicate a larger, more general hopelessness rather than just signs of his own illness. Delving into the depths of despair is more than simply a theoretical pursuit. It is a very intimate and physical encounter. By following Meursault on his trip, we are compelled to face our own anxieties and doubts, as well as our own battles with purpose and being. The harsh and eerie portrayal of a man struggling with the greatest concerns of human life is created by the novel's detached narrative style and minimalist writing, which intensify the feeling of alienation and alone. The Stranger ends on an eerie note, making us feel quite uneasy. Because of this, we have no choice but to face the fact that we are mortal and that life has no purpose. It reflects our ongoing fight for meaning in a meaningless world and serves as a sobering reminder that sadness is inherent to being human. We see how despair can mold and define our lives via Meursault's journey, which takes us to the depths of despair. Examined in Notes from Underground and The Stranger, despair is a complex and long-lasting part of being human. As a constant presence in our life, it robs us of our delusions and compels us to face the truth as it is. Two characters that exemplify this hopelessness in very different, but deeply poignant ways are Underground Man by Dostoevsky and Meursault by Camus. Isolation and heightened self-awareness are the sources of the underground man's melancholy. The destructive repercussions of a mind that has turned against itself, mired in a cycle of futility and self-loathing, are laid bare by his introspective trip. A compelling reminder of how sorrow can warp our views and chip away at our feeling of purpose and belonging in the world. His narrative is deeply moving. The absurdity of existence confronts Meursault, on the other hand, and causes him to despair. He has come to terms with the fact that human existence is based on a foundation of meaningless chaos, and his disconnection and apathy reflect this. Camus shows in his work the existential crisis that people go through when they realize the meaninglessness of their own lives and the universe's seeming indifference to their pain. This collection of stories provides a deep reflection on what it means to be depressed. They provide light on the various forms it might take and how it can impact our lives. As a way of seeing the world, despair is more than simply a feeling. It is the hushed friend who influences our decisions and the shadowy tide that flows through our lives. Ultimately, literature that delves into sorrow serves as a reflection of our personal journeys. In doing so, it compels us to face our most fundamental fears and the harsh realities of our lives. It reveals our state as it really is, without any sugarcoating or reassuring illusions. The legends of Meursault and the Underground Man serve as a reminder that suffering is inherent to the human condition. Our frailty and susceptibility are on full display, as is the never-ending quest for significance in a society that frequently fails to provide any. Our personal lives are burdened by the weight of this hopelessness. It influences how we see the world, the bonds we form with others, and even our identity. It serves as a sobering reminder of the transience of joy and the permanence of sadness. However, by acknowledging and comprehending this hopelessness, we also get a more profound comprehension of who we are and our role in this universe. As we make our way through the shadows, we are forced to confront the most basic realities of our existence.